And welcome, everybody. My name is Dan Fishman. I'm the Executive Director of the People for Liberty, and happy Pride. One of those expressions that I didn't grow up with because we didn't have Pride when I was growing up. Took a while to come around, but now I'm happy to say it. Happy Pride. I'm joined for our Pride broadcast by my fellows in Liberty, Holly Ward, Vice President, Joe Jorgensen, President of People for Liberty. I love saying President Joe Jorgensen. Of course, the founder of People for Liberty, Lauren Postler. Guys, thanks so much for joining me. Happy Pride.
Thanks. You
Happy
too.
Pride.
So, I want to start off, we were going to start off with a very simple conversation about Pride and what it meant to us. But one of the interesting things in setting up and doing the promo for this event is we're seeing a lot of people complaining on our posts for YouTube and Facebook about having a Pride event. And I thought Dr. Jorgensen, as a presidential candidate who traveled around, you had a chance to talk about these things in public, and I wanted to read some of the comments that are showing up on your page. So one of them says, and I'll start off, says, "This is ridiculous. This is not libertarian. We don't celebrate others for the differences. We leave them alone and let them celebrate if they want to." What are your thoughts on that, Joe?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody for giving me their opinion on that. And, that's one of the nice things about social media is we can have a dialogue, because we can go out and say all these things. And if we don't know what people are thinking, then we don't know what's hitting the spot and what's not. So I'm so glad that we have that dialogue, because a lot of people may not have an understanding, or may not, shall I say, be as old as I am, to say that, yes, I realize that this has nothing to do with, let's say, politics, but it does have to do with freedom. And many people today don't remember what it was like earlier, and even before my time, when being gay was so kept in the closet, for instance. And to me, this is just amazing. I'm not sure if anybody here has ever heard of it, but there was an award-winning film called The Lost Weekend, had very famous directors and movie stars. And when I watched The Lost Weekend, and by the way, the movie was about an alcoholic and how, oh my gosh, his life was in turmoil and he didn't know where to go. And I'm watching the movie thinking, okay, this is, interesting movie, but I don't understand why he's so traumatized. Well, it turns out, and by the way, this film is from the 1940s. So it turns out that the original book, the original idea for the movie was that the guy was gay, but he couldn't come out in society. And so when I looked at the film through that lens, I realized, oh, okay, now I understand the trauma. So think about living in a society in which it is so closed, in which people aren't allowed to express their feelings, in which people are put in jail for simply loving somebody that the government doesn't approve of. Imagine it being such an outcast that you can't even film a movie about it. It would be one thing if somebody didn't feel free to do it in their personal life, but to not even have a movie about it just shows what kind of, let's say, underhanded censorship. I mean, it wasn't the government censoring it. It was society, really.
Well, and you talk about some of the consequences. We sort of see that happening today. Crack staffer Holly Ward, you unearthed an amazing statistic that 2021 leads years for anti-LGBTQ legislation.
Yep, almost unanimously through every liberty legislation tracking device and major organization, Human Rights Campaign, ACLU, 2021 hands down has decimated every other year as having the most anti-LGBTQ legislation. And I don't identify with being a gay or sexual minority, but man, I had no idea until I started doing research. And people ask me like, well, why Pride? And I started with that narrative of, well, let me look it up and get back to you. And I thought I'd have a couple legislative things to hand them. It blew me away. I couldn't believe that 2021 was the most decimating year.
And I think that that's a critical thing. And I want to go to another post that was on your page, Joe, but talking about us. So I can't speak for everybody here, but for me, I'm not GSM. I'm a strong ally. But there are things that I will never know, that I can never understand, because when because I am a cis white man, nobody ever makes a statement that invalidates my life choices casually in a conversation, because that doesn't happen. And that is the sort of thing that traumatically affects people. And that's what Pride is about. It's not about politics per se. It's about lives and human lives and us sharing this human experience. And that's why, like, for example, another comment that was on your page, Joe, said, nothing wrong with gays. Most of them are wonderful. The issue is people are shoving this BS down our children's throat. And it's just, what's your reaction to that, Joe?
Well, I can understand why some people would feel this way. For instance, there's been a lot of controversy with drag queens in the story hour. And the problem is that in our country, first of all, there are many anti-gay laws. But on top of that, then there are laws and just the practicality of the government taking money away from you so that you can't afford your own education for your children, that now you don't have the choice of what your children are exposed to. So, for instance, if you want your children to go to a Christian school or a Muslim school or whatever, a Catholic versus Protestant, whatever, you can't do that because the government has taken it away. So I understand the sentiment in that the media is very, putting the message out there all the time. But it wouldn't have such an effect if we had the freedom to choose our own lives and it wasn't a one size fits all. And that's the problem, is the government tries to have a one size fits all where we all abide by the same rules. And the left basically has their idea of what their society is. And that may not be the idea of what your society is or should be.
Lauren, you're muted. No problem. That's a drink for me.
I was going to say that's normally a Dan thing, but here we go.
It is.
So the comment was made that this isn't about politics, and certainly at People for Liberty, we are about people before politics. But I will say, in my opinion, this is where politics has weaponized people's individuality, and that the left has set up themselves as the only protectors of the LGBT and the GSM community, when we know that isn't the case. The right has set themselves up as, the protectors of all things moral and ethical, which we know isn't the case. I would say the Libertarian Party and ideals, and I'm not a libertarian, okay? I vote that way and I identify that way. I'm not a member of the party. But the reason that I ascribe to that ethos is that libertarians celebrate the individual. And us celebrating pride does not denounce individuality or suggest that we have to play into identity politics the way the left and the right do. What pride means to me is that we recognize that individual liberties have been trampled for generations for members of the LGBT and GSM community, and we celebrate them finding paths to freedom. We celebrate them overcoming those injustices, and we recognize that there is still a fight today. So for everyone that says, oh, you're playing identity politics, I would say we're fighting for the individual outside of the identity politics that the left and right would have you play into.
Yeah, and in fact, I thought we were going to get to identity politics in a minute, but let me make two comments on what you said. First, most recently, you said identity politics. Okay, we are not trying to get across the message that you should vote for anyone because of their sexual orientation. And in fact, liberty says that you don't do that. The free market says that you always go to the best person with the best qualities, with the best product for the best price, regardless of race, color, creed, sexual orientation, and so forth. So this is not the identity politics that you hear on the left. I would never, and I've got plenty of gay friends, I would never suggest that anyone vote for anybody specifically because they are gay. That is not what we are saying. But also, Lauren, you made a really good point about the Democrats really not doing what they say they'll do. On the campaign trail, and I often mention this to younger people because I knew it would shock them a little more. I would ask them, and again, younger people tend to be a little more on the liberal side, especially if they're in one of our many fine universities. And I would ask them, did you realize that as recently as 2012, and that was just 8 years earlier, as recently as 2012, both Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton thought that gay marriage should be illegal? And usually they were shocked. It's like, well, what? No, why would they even think to make it illegal? And, part of these questions kind of show that we're heading in the right direction. A lot of people saying, don't shove it down my throat. Why do we have to talk about it? It's a choice. Let people live that way. That shows that we're making progress, because now gay marriage is legal. We're not back in 2012 where we've got the president of the United States and the soon-to-be nominee saying that it should be illegal. And let me point out that the Libertarian Party was formed in 1971. And in 1971, the Libertarian Party said everybody should have the same rights. Gay, straight, black, white, whatever, it doesn't matter. So while the Libertarian Party has been advocating for individual rights, not just sexual orientation, not just race, not just heredity, not just who your parents are, but everything about you, disabilities, whatever. The Libertarian Party has always been on the side of the individual. And unfortunately, we're having a lot of Democrats now who are saying, oh, the Democratic Party is for the individual. In fact, I was recently in a panel a couple of weeks ago with Democrats, and one of the Democrats said, well, the Democratic Party, they're always on the side of the individual. And I was like, oh, yeah? Then why is it that 8 years ago, your president thought that gay marriage should be illegal? That doesn't sound like you're standing up for the individuals. So, and keep in mind, we've already had, I welcomed Happy Easter to the many Christians. It doesn't mean that I'm suggesting everybody become a Christian. I said Happy Passover. We've come out for many things. And in fact, we're going to have an Immigration Day coming up. So really, there are many, we're trying to handle the topics in all the spheres, so that everybody, gay, straight, again, black, white, immigrant, native, whatever you are, that you have the same rights and freedoms as everybody else. Because freedom should be colorblind, it should be sexual orientation blind, it should be blind everywhere. And the only way to have such a society is to go ahead and tear down those barriers so that we can all live under the same laws.
Absolutely.
Dan, you're muted.
Holly, in my biography.
We should have a Dan, you're muted button somewhere.
Yeah. Holly, I know you have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, definitely. So ultimately, the government doesn't have a right to say on what we can and can't do based solely on who you are. And I intend to stand with individuals to fight for liberties, for every liberty. So, that means fighting for your Second Amendment protections. That means fighting for freedom of speech. That means fighting against illegal search and seizure. But then today, and this month of Pride, that means having a frank and honest conversation about the relationship between government and gay and sexual minorities. And that doesn't mean that any of those liberties are any more or less important than any others. It just means that today we're having a focused conversation. And I do see in the comments we have a lot of what is GSM. GSM is a gay and sexual minority.
Gender and sexual minority.
Yes.
Yeah,
so,
gender and sexual minority.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. You're totally right, and you're absolutely right. And one of the important things about this, we have our first guest coming on, and I'm gonna have Lauren introduce him. But the immediacy of this should be apparent to everybody. 2 years ago, I had the privilege to march with one of our future guests, Ashley, at the first National Trans Visibility Day. 2020 was the highest year for trans murders since the HRC has been tracking that statistic. The time is now. Okay, it's not something that we've passed. We're fighting for visibility. We're fighting for people's lives, and we're fighting for their liberties. And that's what Pride is about. And that's what visibility is about. And so as we move on to the show, Lauren, why don't you tell us about our first guest?
Yeah, and thanks so much, Dan, and to Dr. Jorgensen for joining us. I'm excited to introduce someone who almost needs no introduction at this point, our good friend Chase Olver in Georgia, who I understand is dealing with some storms coming through, huh, Chase?
Whoops, sorry. And you are muted, Chase.
Oops, Chase, are you on a double mute, double secret, super mute? Try that again. All right, say a little something for the camera. Nope.
Yep,
Okay.
he's going to come out and come back in. Let's finish up that basic thing. So, I mean, we can introduce Chase a little bit more. So, Chase, Senate candidate, congressional candidate, chair of Outright Libertarians now. Now, I have to confess, I know I can't remember if Chase just became chair or if he just was chair. And I apologize for not knowing that. But
we'll clarify for us.
Yeah, but Chase is a guy who exemplifies the point that it's liberty. It's Chase is currently the fundraising director, and Ashley Shade, who will be on later, is the chair of Outright. Thank you, Ashley, for those good notes in the background. And now we see Chase. Hey, Chase, how's it going? We still can't hear you now. And you had it before. So, although you were outside before, maybe you should go back outside in the rain.
No, don't go back outside in the rain.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Good job. You're there.
Yay. I fixed it. So happy to be here. You guys said I was the fundraising director of Outright, so that's already out of the way. I'm really, really happy to be here and to talk about Pride a little bit.
Yes. So Chase, you've been such a good friend to People for Liberty. We love, showcasing your strong voice for liberty, for the LGBT and the GSM community. And I thought that it's important for us to set the stage for how the Pride celebration came to be. And I think really hearkening back to, our roots in fighting for freedom as part of the libertarian movement and why that is so relevant to Pride.
Yeah. So why is People for Liberty and why are libertarians celebrating Pride right now? And that harkens back to 1969 to Stonewall. And if you're not familiar with the story of Stonewall, you kind of have to put yourself in the place of where GSM people were at the time. So this was in New York City, which is about the only place you could really comfortably at all really be GSM, was a major city at the time. And the Stonewall Inn was a bar in New York City that was run by the mafia. It was a dingy, crappy bar with watered down drinks, but it's where people at the time in 1969, society had deemed that's where GSM people were to be, and basically one day the police decided to raid the Stonewall Inn and start making arrests. And you could arrest people for dancing with people of the same sex or wearing clothes of the quote unquote opposite gender. And so the police raided this bar in 1969. They started taking patrons out and arresting them. And the patrons started saying, what are we doing? It's time we fight back against this, And it sparked a 3-day long demonstration, a riot that it shoved, it pushed the police back in. It forced the riot squad to come out and rescue the police from the bar. And it was a show of people saying, we are no longer going to be shoved into these tiny, dingy bars anymore, because if you're going to come in here and arrest us here, we're going to not do that. We're going to come out. We're going to be who we are. We're going to be part of the mainstream society. And it's what sparked the gay liberation movement. And 1 year later, they had a Christopher Street March in New York City. And that was the first gay pride march. And so what Stonewall was is a celebration of human liberty against authoritarian police force. And that is something that libertarians, I think, should be able to celebrate and rightfully look to as a milestone in libertarian history, because it is a group of people who basically stood up and said, you know what, police, you know what, government, we're not going to do what you tell us to do anymore. We're free to be who we want to be. And that is why we celebrate Pride. That is why I am so happy to be a libertarian who is GSM. I became a libertarian because of Pride celebrations, because John Monds and the Libertarian Party of Georgia were out there speaking the message of human freedom and individual liberty to the GSM community in Atlanta. And that's where I first heard the liberty message. So it's a very important time for me. And I think looking back on the history, the blood and the blood of Stonewall was barely dry when the Libertarian Party was formed. And we have been pro GSM from the onset. And this is something that we need to be proud of, and that we need to make sure that every Pride we make known that we've been there from the beginning, while Democrats and Republicans have taken decades to catch up.
Absolutely, Chase. And I'll say that I've been joined by my fellow strong ally, Stevie Nicks, as a champion for the GSM community, and very vocal today about it too. Chase, when I think about fighting for freedom, when I think about some of the reasons that I was drawn to the liberty movement, and I make that as a broad umbrella, beyond the party, but the liberty movement itself, I wanted to be free to be me. And I think that's a very basic, human right and human need that we have, that we want to find community. We want to connect with people with whom we share a voice and support one another. So when I think about all of your freedoms all of the time, and when I think about why, I decided to join the movement, this is a big part of it, that as an ally and as, a woman who has many, many, many gay and lesbian friends and transgender friends with whom I'm very close, seeing their rights trampled, seeing their identities dismissed, I knew that if the government could do that to them, they could do it to me.
Yeah, well, I think there is a
do it too. So
yeah, well, I think there's a great through line between the GSM community and the liberty movement. And that is because in the GSM community, we're fiercely individualistic. We love our own individuality. We celebrate it. We're every color of the rainbow, every type of person, every type of body. We do not like to discriminate. In fact, that's part of the ethos of pride and being out there and loving everybody as being who they are, letting people own their own bodies, their own gender expression. That is something that is central to both the liberty movement and to the GSM community, is that we have self-ownership over ourselves. And then you can even find through lines all through GSM history. We just got through a year and a half long pandemic. We're finally starting to come out of it. People are starting to live again. And if you want to talk about a group of people who fought the FDA tooth and nail against bureaucracy and red tape and abuse, look no further than the GSM community and ACT UP during the HIV/AIDS crisis in the 1980s. They were out there literally being arrested, having mass die-ins and demonstrations to combat the FDA's malfeasance and red tape and horrible bureaucracy and basically bad government, right? And so, we can find those through lines from the GSM community and the liberty movement all through the history, from Stonewall to today, to these bills that are all over the country. Why is it in Tennessee now you have to have a sign up that if you allow trans people to use the restroom of their choice? What kind of business red tape is that? That's bureaucracy. That's exactly against the small government ideals of our party. When it comes to bathroom bills in schools, why are we making these federal and state mandates instead of letting local communities and local communities decide what happens with school and create more school choice so you can pick what school you want to go to? Yes. It goes all the way through the movement. And like I said, from Stonewall on to today. And, I want to talk a little bit about what pride means to me. I got this piece of art right here. This is made by Charlie Ray Campbell. He's an 18-year-old trans young person. This right here is a piece that I bought from him. On the bottom, it says, "Tomorrow there'll be more of us." It's a line from Hamilton. And this is a flame of liberty, torch of liberty. And that's what pride means to me. It means basically continuing to stand up and fight so that young people like Charlie and others in the party and in the movement can be who they are and be expressive and be free. And that's something that I think we can all celebrate. That's why I wear the Support Trans Kids and Vote Libertarian button, because I believe that kids, their parents and their doctors should be making decisions for them and not government. And that's the fight that we continue today, like I said, from Stonewall on to today and tomorrow and the next day.
I love it, Chase. And what a beautiful piece of artwork. Thank you for sharing. For those that are interested in finding out more about Outright, we do have the website scrolling across the bottom. Mm-hmm. I know we'll have Ashley and Brianna on in just a minute, but do you want to mention a little bit about Outright? And then I'd say as closing, what would be your call to action for people tuning in? How can they be part of the fight for freedom for the Pride movement?
All right. So first and foremost, I love Outright Libertarians. We're a wonderful organization. We're a nonprofit who is dedicated to building bridges between the libertarian movement and the party, rather, and the GSM community. And I do want to say, if you go to outrightusa.com, you can join, become a member. We'd be happy to have you. We're trying to update state platforms all over the country for the party. We're trying to also do activism all over the country as well, outreach in the community. You can also I have my Outright crop top right here, but you can get Outright shirts now. You can do all kinds of stuff. But as far as what...
Ooh, I think Chase might have frozen. It is storming in Georgia. I will say that I know he was going to suggest that everyone check out the website, and we will talk to Holly in a little bit about the People for Liberty website and where we are tracking legislation that violates people's liberty. So part of taking action is an ethos that we follow here at People for Liberty. And Outright Libertarians, there you are, Chase, is a nonprofit organization we are proud to call a strategic partner and a friend, among many other organizations in the movement. So Chase, did you have a call to action you wanted to make sure we heard?
Yeah, so a call to action I can tell for everybody in the Liberty movement is to actually get out and be involved in the GSM community as an ally. The best way to learn about GSM people and their issues is to actually go out and meet GSM people where they are. Joe Jorgensen and Spike Cohen, they did a great job of traveling all over the country to meet people where they were during the campaign last year. And that's something that we as individuals can continue to do in the spirit of is, go out to a GSM function, meet people in the community, listen to them, and preach the message of individual liberty and freedom to them. And I guarantee you'll have a very receptive audience most of the time.
Thanks so much for joining us, Chase. We'll connect with you online, and I'm going to turn it back to you, Holly, because we have a jam-packed evening, and we're excited to hear from more.
Yes, I am so excited for our next group. So People for Liberty, we have a lot of groups that interact and interface with people based on areas of liberties that best touch them and that they identify with. And so our next group up is actually from our LGBT plus People for Liberty. So we're going to have up Miss Ashley Shade and Miss Brianna Coyle. And we also have Michelle Friedman, but it looks like her video is a bit off. Michelle, are you with us?
I'm here.
Well, we hear you, and it looks like your image is a little bit scrambled, or maybe you're just being really festive. We support it either way.
Let me see if I can try something different.
Yeah, sure. Here, Michelle, why don't we go ahead and try and log back out and log back in? Chase set the tone there that may be our best solution. But Ashley and Brianna, I'd love for you to introduce yourselves.
Go ahead.
Me first? Okay. So I'm Brianna Coyle. I am one of the moderators for People for Liberty's LGBT plus for Liberty group. I'm also the former outreach director of Outright Libertarians, and I'm still exhausted from New York City Pride.
I am excited. Mr. Dan Fishman of People for Liberty was going to go up there, and he registered and signed up. And there were so many volunteers this year that they said, "Hey, we need to limit that." So were both of you at New York City Pride this year?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, Ashley, we'd love to introduce yourself to the audience for those who don't know all of your amazing work that you've done.
Sure. So my name is Ashley Shade. I am the chairwoman of Outright Libertarians, the chair of the Libertarian Party of Massachusetts, and a candidate for office. I am running for city council in the city of North Adams, Massachusetts. And I do want to just quickly touch in. I'm also a moderator here for the LGBT for Liberty group. But one thing that was said earlier about pride and why people question pride, there's something I want you all to know, and this is really, really important. Pride is not a celebration of who we are. Pride is a celebration of where we are. Pride is a revolution. It is liberation. It is a fight, as Chase said. It is a celebration of fighting against tyranny and oppression for years, unjust laws that kept us from being able to be who we are, live our lives, and be free. And so pride and the GSM community is one of the biggest communities out there for outreach and libertarian values, because we have fought every moment of our lives for liberation and for freedom. And it is so important to all of us individually to be free. And that is the foundation of what libertarianism, freedom, the freedom to live our lives how we choose. And so Pride events are so important for outreach and new recruitment and new members, because as was said earlier, if one of us is not free, then none of us are free. Because if they can take one person's rights away, they can take all of our rights away.
Absolutely. And it looks like we now have Michelle Friedman. Hi, Michelle.
Yay!
So, Michelle, now that your video is working, I'd love if you could give all of our listeners here a little introduction onto who you are.
Sure, absolutely. I have been adminning the P4L pages for about a year now, back when they were actually campaign pages. So about 6 months ago, I was put in the LGBT page, and to be perfectly honest, I was floored, because what do I have to offer? You know, like as you said earlier, Holly, as a heterosexual woman, what do I have to offer? So in the beginning, I was kind of shy, and I sat back, and it was honestly Ashley who kind of showed me the way in that group before we snagged her in. What I love about the P4L pages is that each page has its own vibe, and that's the vibe of the LGBT page is all about love. Every post, that's right, every post, every comment, every person in there is constantly lifting each other up. And that to me it makes it feel like home. And I knew that was exactly where that page needed to go. So,
well, Michelle, I definitely identify with that. So as a straight woman, I didn't talk about Pride. And I grew up in California, right? And I should have definitely been talking about this. And I joined the military, and I was deployed, and I was living in a bunker with 7 other women, and one of whom was a lesbian. And it was during Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And I realized I didn't know how to be an ally. She would say things like, "Don't talk about your husband. Can you mention your spouse, please?" And I'd think like, God, get over yourself. And it wasn't until like later in that deployment that I really got to, know and grow to be a close friend, that I realized I was being a terrible ally, first off, by not even understanding why some of this was so necessary. But being now, years later, that's exactly what I see in the community and in the group, is even if you're not LGBT, it's helpful when you're an ally. It's helpful to talk and understand about Pride. And so I'd like to hear from all 3 of you. What does Pride mean to you? Ashley, I don't know how we're going to top that. You give me goosebumps. But Brianna, what does Pride mean to you?
Well, yeah, it is hard to top what Ashley said, but Pride is all about just being who you are, and not being controlled by the government, not being able to say that I want to be free and I want to be me without the government being able to enforce any type of laws that will restrict who you can marry, how many people you can marry, or what you have on your birth certificate, right? There are now so many different laws where the government is trying to say that you have to do X, Y, or Z as the sex you were assigned with at birth, or all these bathroom laws, and it's absolutely ridiculous. And when people talk about Pride, there are people who want to say, oh, it's identity politics, or how is the government preventing people from, LGBTQ people from living their lives? There's tons of laws, like right now, that are trying to prevent people from just existing and doing things that are necessary, even for their own health care. And that's why it is so important, and a lot of people don't realize, and they're always trying to act like it's some form of collectivism when it's not. And even in terms of the greater liberty movement and libertarians, this is a core value of libertarianism. This is what we've always believed in. We've always believed that the government should not have to control who you marry, or who you lie with. And it's sad that we're still in 2021 and we still have to have this conversation. Even though we've come so far, and I'm glad that we have, there's still work that needs to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will ask, how did all of you find People for Liberty, and how did you even find yourself being a part of the community and adminning it?
I'll go if that's okay. So basically, I believe I found People for Liberty as I think I saw an ad or something. I just found them on Facebook when the organization was very new, and I was like, wow, this looks pretty interesting. And then I saw all the groups start coming up, and it made sense to me that People for Liberty was trying to appeal to different demographics, like, you know, the LGBT for Liberty group or the Veterans for Liberty group. I'm sorry, not veterans, military supporters. And they're just, you know, these are all different other forms of self-identity. But for some reason, a lot of people only claim that it's the GSM people that are playing identity politics, and which is just absurd. But I'm just glad that People for Liberty is actually creating a space in the liberty movement for different groups of people to, you know, to converse about their, you know, their perspectives on things.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that 100%. With the question, what does pride mean to me? Well, I just want to share a quick thing. This entire weekend, I experienced pride on so many different levels. On Saturday, I attended Berkshire Pride here in my local county. On Sunday, I attended New York City Pride Fest. And on Monday, to honor the anniversary of the Stonewall riots here in North Adams, I was able to get our city to raise pride flags here on our main street for the first time. What does pride mean to me? It means being able to live your life unafraid and unapologetically and be who you are. That's what it's all about. As far as joining People for Liberty, I was brought in as one of the first guests during the People for Liberty lunch hour. I did an interview with Dan Fishman, and I've been involved ever since. So great organization, great things happening, and I love you all.
So I found the People for Liberty pages during the Joe Jorgensen campaign. I was very active with the state affiliate and petitioning, collecting signatures. And I found myself just wanting to do more and more and more to get the message of liberty out there. Because, I mean, everybody was stuck between these two horrible candidates. And here was the Jorgensen-Cohen campaign, and it just gave so much hope. But I didn't know what else to do, so I honestly became a keyboard warrior. And people joke about that, but I would spend as much time as I could on public pages just offering a different solution to people who were looking for a home. And I discovered the Women Voters for Jorgensen page, or the LGBT Voters for Jorgensen's page, which eventually transferred over to the People for Liberty. So I guess I just keyboard warriored my way into being invited, because I got a message from Leonte saying he liked my content and would I want to help. And I was thrilled.
Michelle, I will say that you, hands down, are one of my favorite Liberty in Action people. And everything that I know about you and everything that you've done. And, you know, it's not fair to say without Ashley and Brianna as well. Both of you have taken the work and taken the action and taken everything that we've kind of talked about in these groups, but you bring it to action. You bring liberty to action and you bring it to life. And so I just want to say thank you so much, all three of you. Any last thoughts before we get ready to bring up our next guest?
Yeah, I just wanted to throw another quick shout out to Charlie Ray Campbell, Art by Ash on Facebook. He did this amazing piece for me, custom made for Pride celebration. I love it. He's an amazing artist. He's an amazing human being, and he's a GSM person. So during Pride, don't buy your Pride stuff from corporations. Buy it from GSM people, businesses, and nonprofits that are supporting the community.
Well, thank you so much to everybody. I'm so glad that you guys are part of the People for Liberty team. And so Lauren and Dan, we're going to say thank you.
Awesome. And, you know, the LGBT plus for Liberty is a great group, and it shows one of those things that it's a place for people who want to have a conversation about liberty to come into and be around other people who are in the liberty movement. And our next guest is actually a great example of that. I first met Justin when he was the youth director for my 2018 auditor campaign in Massachusetts. And at the time, he wasn't out. In fact, I'm going to bring you in right now, Justin. Hey, man, welcome to the show.
Hi, nice to be here.
Appreciate the Rainbow Gadsden. So, you know, it's interesting. I forgive me if I get the date wrong. It's 2 months ago that you announced on Facebook you came out.
It was right in the beginning of Pride Month, so it was about a month ago.
Okay, and one of the interesting things about it was that you said, if anybody has any questions about what I'm doing, why this is happening, anything like that,
Yeah.
please just ask me. And for me, as an old person who lived through, a tremendous amount of intolerance, I thought, this is it. Some things are working, that we have gotten to a world where this is more accessible. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit. I know it's a personal process, but if you wanted to share some of that about, first of all, sort of your revelation, and then second, what made you feel comfortable, safe, the need to tell everybody on Facebook and say, here I am.
Yeah. So to answer the first part of that, I was questioning for maybe anywhere from 6 months to a year. It's hard to pinpoint exactly. So I actually wasn't thinking that I was bisexual while I was on the campaign. It was actually much after that, like during COVID. And it kind of started with I sort of found attraction to one male person. I was straight before that. And then it sort of and I thought, yeah, this is just one thing. But then it got more and more. And then I realized, okay, I'm actually bisexual. And then I think when it comes to like Facebook coming out, so I slowly came out to the important people in my life. So first was my partner, Emma, and she was queer as well. She was very supportive of me. And then next was my sister. My sister's queer as well. I have a lot of queer people who I'm close to in my life, which I think helped a lot. And then I came out to my parents, and then I came out to some of my extended family. And I think once I covered those people, like those were the people that I was most I really felt I needed to personally come out to them. And also the people who, if they're not supportive, like there's going to be like, that's going to have the strongest effects in my life. And I think making the jump to Facebook, it was like, hey, and it was kind of making the realization, hey, if someone's not okay with me, I don't want them to be in my life. And also just knowing that I had even if I did lose friends, I so far have not, even if I did lose some of the many connections that I have, that I would have that support of my partner and my immediate family and my extended family to fall back on.
So let me talk a little bit about your work in the Liberty Movement.
Yeah.
And then if you can talk about some parallels between the two, because, you were involved in a big campaign early on. You were, I'm not presuming how old you are, but I think you were 19 when you were working on the auditor campaign.
I think 18.
18. So here you are, 18 years old, running the youth organization for a statewide campaign.
Yeah.
Doing all the stuff in the Liberty Movement. And did that in any way help to prepare? You sort of saw, the constant support messages coming out of the Libertarian Party. Did that have anything to do with sort of thinking about where you were going to go later on in your life, making decisions about either coming out or anything like that?
Yeah, I think in terms of actually realizing I was bisexual, there wasn't much connection, but for coming out, there definitely was. And I think just knowing that, like, a certain percentage of my friends who were in the Liberty Movement, like, I knew because they were in the Liberty Movement that they would be accepting and supportive. And so I think having at least part of my community and part of my connections being in the Liberty Movement helped me to more easily come out because I knew that they would be supportive.
That's awesome. So let me wrap up then. As somebody who's recently out, what does pride mean to you?
So Pride for me, personally, it was it was a way for me to feel comfortable enough that I could make the jump to Facebook, because there were so many supportive messages, and because everyone was talking about it in a positive way. Everyone, like, there was a community during Pride Month that encouraged coming out when you were ready, and the community that encouraged, me to be who I am. I think that I think that really made me feel comfortable. So Pride was about making me feel comfortable with who I am, and making me feel comfortable to let everyone know who I am.
That's awesome, man. Well, I want to thank you very much for joining us, because we're going from you, a sort of new modern experience, and thanks again for coming in, man, to a friend of mine who actually, I went to high school with this guy. It's astonishing how paths diverge and the universe finds a way to bring us back together. I want to introduce my friend Keith Price. Hey, Keith, how's it going?
Hi, Dan. How are you? So you got new gay and now old gay. Is that what we're doing now? Is that the plan?
I'm just saying older. I'm not saying old.
So how about season?
Season
gay.
is good. Absolutely. Like a fine wine. That's exactly where you are.
Exactly.
Well, and it's interesting because, as a person who's followed your comedy career for quite a while, you've had this message that has really resonated with me. And, at first I talked, you did a thing where, sort of relating to this, you were on an interview where you were talking about the fact that you spoke to a kid who said, I've known I was gay since 15. Yes. And your reaction was, and I'm not going to do a good Keith Price imitation, but your reaction was, really? How could you possibly have known that at 15? Because 15. For you at 15, it wasn't that clear, right?
No, well, you know what? At 15, there were things that were happening. There were, there was realizations that were starting to kind of come into focus. But, we lived in Texas. This is Galveston, Texas, 1980. And, that was not the time nor the place to feel comfortable enough to express yourself. And now you also have to remember, and as much as I'm enjoying watching the esteemed group of people that you've collected, it's like, you also have to add the fact that I was also a Black, African American living in Galveston, Texas, figuring out his sexual identity. It just was not necessarily the most fertile ground.
Right.
to come springboarding out into, the new reality. Well, and yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, because that ties into the fact that you didn't stay in Galveston. And I thought very early on,
hell no.
Keith talked about the fact that there was a place to go where, and so you went there. Where you moved?
Well, I went to Austin first. That's where the full ultimate discovery of who I was going to allow myself to become. And then, and of course, you can't stay in Texas forever. So I left and came back to New York. I was born in New York. I was born in Brooklyn, but we moved to Texas. Yeah, we moved to Galveston when I was 6.
Gotcha.
And so I was very aware of a New York energy, but at the same time, we were living in Texas. So you just kind of figure it out as you were moving through. And I just knew that I was going to come back. I knew that there was no way that I could live in Texas and be as gay as I am, as fabulous as I am, as Black as I am, and still be alive. Because, now they open carry guns pretty much in Texas. So someone like me is a walking target for somebody who's had too much beer, don't like the queers, and, let's not forget the N-words. And so I am very glad that the age of discovery for me came at a time when I was able to handle it. And I was in a place where I could explore somewhat. I mean, Austin, Texas was still very experimental, but it was far more accepting of that energy and lifestyle back in the early, the mid 80s to early 90s.
Very accepting, but it was still Texas.
but it was still Texas, exactly. Which is what I always used to say about Austin. Austin is fantastic, but it's still in Texas.
Right.
So
Right. You dig a little bit, it's still Texas. And I say that as a person who loves Austin. I want to talk a little bit about the fact that you were on Sirius Radio, on
yes,
OutQ. You were one of the most recognizable voices for a long time. Most of the most widely
thank
spread
you.
voices. Well, I mean,
Thank you.
look, I already got you on the show, man. I'm not buttering you up for anything in particular. But at one point in time, did you think to yourself, man, that's a huge responsibility? Because here I am in this position. When I grew up, there were no gay voices in media.
Well, the thing is I became very aware of my status as a political figure. And that started when I was doing comedy. When I stepped on the stages in New York in the late 90s on stage and said, I'm black, I'm gay, hello, and I would do it with like a big boa or something fantastic. That was a political statement because at the time, there was nobody doing that in New York City except for drag queens. And there was no one that was doing it and doing the comedy aspect of it as themselves in an environment where they felt comfortable. And it was a very interesting time to figure that stuff out. That was like the late 90s, early 2000s. And so when I got the job working at Sirius as this on-air host, by that time I had been doing a lot of comedy. I had a one-man show that was kind of having its moment, and then it turned into this great documentary that my friend did about me, which I think was really one of the things that helped me keep the job at Sirius. But one of the things that was happening at the time is like there was nobody like me, and I had the wherewithal in the moment to know that there was no one like me, and so. And hope, and I want to say this without sounding too shady to the younger generation of gays that's popping out and living their lives, but I also knew that I had a different set of eyes on me.
Yeah.
Once I became that public figure, on OutQ, I had a different set of eyes on me. And so I was there not only to represent myself, which is what I always try to do in the best possible way I can, but at the same time, I also recognize that there's tons of overweight people that are looking at me in a weird way. There are now black people that are looking at me in a different way. There are black queens. I used to get emails and phone calls, all the time from, young black gay kids that were living in places they certainly couldn't be gay. And it was a great thing because I knew as soon as I took that job that I had a responsibility, and I tried my best to still have fun because, you can't live for other people. You got to live for yourself. But I also knew that what it meant for me to be in that position, which is the reasons why many of the times when you heard things that were said about things from the radio station, you never saw my name attached to them because I knew anything that I opened my mouth to say would be, held with a higher, it would be under a different microscope. And so I always wanted to make sure the things that I said or the things that I felt in the moments that I expressed them were as genuine as they could be, as honest as they could be. And at the same time, something that I wasn't afraid to have somebody repeat back to me, because that's what also happens too. It's like you get a lot of repetition of your words and taken out of context. It's a different thing,
And I want to mention briefly that people who want to see Keith's video, I reviewed it myself recently. Ebony Chunky Love, Bitch Can't Get a Date. It is as funny now. And there's the boa.
There's the boa
talking about.
Magic boa.
Yeah, so it's easy to find on Amazon Prime. You could watch it right after this show.
Thank you.
One of the things, though, that I want to talk about, I want to briefly say, too, people want to find out more about you. You're at Comedy Daddy on Twitter and KeithPriceComic.com.
Yeah.
KeithPriceComedy.com.
Easy schmeezy.
Easy schmeezy. So all that being said, you talked about sort of the freedom to be you.
Right.
That courage that you found inside. How does that make you feel about pride today? Because interestingly enough, we sort of, go ahead. Tell me.
Oh no, finish your statement because I'll jump right in.
Because it was interesting because pride, I think, is one of those things that it's really an individual reaction to it.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of people who are big supporters of the GSM movement, and for them, pride is a very private ceremony. They only want to celebrate it with their friends who really understand what they've been through. But then for other people, pride is about saying, look, if I can quote, we're here, we're queer, get used to it.
Well, okay. So the first thing for me is I feel like pride itself, the whole thing that it's become, it is a personal thing for many of us, because like I said, depending upon your journey to get to becoming who you are come, the fourth Sunday of the month of June, by the whatever vehicles and mechanisms that have gotten you to be that person that you are that day, for me, it means I am, first of all, still here.
Yep, exactly.
Hey,
you are.
I'm still here. And that's, the first and foremost, the most important thing. The second thing about my pride, or my sense of pride, or what I feel at the time is that I was very lucky. And, this is a crazy thing to say, that I was born between two very important movements. I was born right after the passage of the civil rights bills in 64. I was born in 67. And then right before Stonewall. And so in between those two things, I got sandwiched with this idea much later on when I look at it, that I am supposed to be as free as I could possibly be because of those two movements, as a Black person and as a gay person. And so for me, pride now is being able to own all of that and know that no matter what people think, say, feel, do, none of that's going to change, and I'm going to own that. And if you don't like it, there's nothing that I can do to fix that for you. You know what I'm saying? Like, right. And so for me, my pride is that I own that I am not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but that's not why I'm living my life. It's interesting because I don't consider myself like a libertarian, and I don't find myself caught up in a lot of labels, but I love what the things that I've been hearing, which is about being able to just live your life. It's like, you pay your bills, you do your taxes, you live your life, then people shouldn't be fucking with you. I'm sorry. I get so angry because I feel like
okay, because we hate the FCC, so that's okay. But I mean, they restrict liberty. I want to bring in my colleagues real quick as we send you off, and
yes.
That thing that you said there, talking about the idea of just be free. It's such a simple concept, and I wanted to thank you, Keith, for having exemplified that for so many people over time. And I think it's one of those things. Well, I think it's really important. I have a lot of friends. My brother has come out recently, and
get out really. See, now we have to get off the air and have like family dish because I want to hear the story. But go ahead.
Right, absolutely,
that's hometown gossip. Don't mind us.
We will definitely catch up. But you, as a guy who a radio guy, you also know. Damn, that time thing is coming up.
Sure do.
So we are going to be hitting that soon. I want to tell people that they can find out more about Keith, www.keithpricecomic.com. You're doing a lot of writing. I'm hoping that there's some more stand-up coming soon because I'm just down the road now. And so
that's right.
If you're doing something in New York, brother, I'm going to be there.
Well, and now that we can travel freer,
exactly.
Then I probably will be in your area too, because it's about time to get on the road and do some stuff. So
that's awesome. Well, thanks again.
Thank you all.
We will talk to you again soon. All right, my fellow Liberty comrades in arms.
Wow.
Happy Pride.
Show.
Yeah.
I want to highlight something that Keith said, and he brought up he doesn't get bogged down in politics, and he's not really in the political divide, and that's People for Liberty. We are people before politics, and that's I think one of my favorite things is we're just talking about liberty, and it is talking about individual people. And man, I was so excited when he said that. I was like, yes, Keith, that's the message.
It's such a great message because all right, I'm going to get this wrong now, but it's the guy, Bill O'Reilly. Okay, Bill O'Reilly, right? Not a particularly model of compassion or anything like that. But
no, sir.
When he came out,
where are we going here, Dan?
He came out for marriage equality. And he came out on the air on Fox and said, here's the thing. When we were just fighting, over social constructs, I was against it. But when they talked about it in terms of liberty, I couldn't oppose it anymore. And that's what we want liberty to do. We want people to start thinking of liberty as the freedom to live your own life, because that's bigger. We're in a place right now where the country is hurt. I mean, I feel it. Like, I see this hatred and I see the anger sometimes, and I'm like, how do we get here? I just want to be friends with everybody. I want to share this idea that, we are bound together with this noble idea of the country, of America. No kings, no princes. We're all citizens together. We're all people together living our lives. And we see people deliberately trying to divide us for political gain. Liberty isn't about that. Liberty is the thing that sets us free and unites us.
Well, and Dan, to that end, I'm so grateful that we had members of our LGBT plus for Liberty group here today. And Keith mentioned this and a few others did as well. One of the goals for our groups was to create a safe place for people to be authentic and as free as they can be. And that means, exploring all sorts of tough conversations and exploring what liberty means to them personally. So for those people who are saying, I'd like to learn more about the liberty movement, I'd like to learn more about the principles and how it helps me to be who I am, we encourage you to check out our groups. And for those of you who are active freedom fighters and who are as passionate as we are about putting liberty into action, we invite you to check out our website where we are tracking liberty opposing legislation. And this year was a banner year for legislation impacting the LGBT and GSM community. So we hope that if you're tuning in, you'll subscribe to our newsletter, you'll check out one of our 4 liberty groups on Facebook, and help us track legislation so we can put liberty in action and make a difference.
I'll definitely hammer home, and Dan, you're muted. I'll take advantage of that.
I was going to say, Holly, take us home.
Yeah, so it's the same message from me every time, right? Is getting out there and getting active, whether it's online, whether it's in your communities, whether it's going out and volunteering at a local shelter or doing something nearby. Take this and be active, and we want to be active with you. We believe in liberty in action and actually getting out there and standing up for liberties and everything that we've discussed tonight. So awesome. please be active in your pursuit of liberty.
Thanks, everyone.
Best way to do it. Happy Pride, everybody. Good night.
Happy Pride.